Hello and welcome back to Football and Next Moneyball. Today we have the next instalment in the Pick of the Day series for you. Sorry about the delay on this one. I actually had it ready to record on Tuesday, but I didn't get around to actually making the video. So hopefully, again, it's a case of better late than never. And in fact, his price has moved a little bit since then and it's settled back down. So it's probably a good thing that I delayed it. For today's pick, the player is actually someone I've been watching for quite a while now. And his price has now fallen to the point where I can't ignore the potential for profit any longer. Having gone through the analysis, there's quite a lot to be optimistic about here. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at how limited opportunities this season have left his price in free fall to the point where you can now pick him up for the same price as he was in March of this year, which for a young player is pretty unusual in today's market. Also, we'll see that despite limited opportunities, he's actually managed to win a PB already, and we'll take a look at what that would have equated to in today's market with the improved dividend returns. Then to finish off, we have the profit target analysis, which in my eyes works out to one of the most compelling cases for a player that we've looked at so far on the series. Before we get going, if you haven't already, please don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. If you want to be notified when the new videos come out, then you can hit the bell icon, and if you want to follow me on Twitter, then you can search for @IndexMoneyball. So today's player is one that you might recognise if you watched the recent Best Buy Now segment at the end of the monthly review video last week. And that player is Amadou Haidara at RB Leipzig. So this is a player that I used in Carlos Alena's comparison, and since that video, he's actually seen very little game time at Leipzig, and his price has fallen as a result. This has left him sitting at close to his 6-month low, and what seems to me like a great time to buy, as I see there being a lot of potential for this player if he was to start playing for Leipzig, or if he was to get a loan move in January. I also believe his current price is pretty close to bottoming, and it already accounts for him not playing much at Leipzig, so if the rest of the year he was to just continue being on the bench and having bit parts to play, I see our risk being pretty limited of him dropping much lower than this. If we look at his 1-year graph here, we can see that he actually hit 70p back in March, and he got as high as 98p on the 12th of August, so at the start of this season, there was a lot of expectation around him. He came to Leipzig from RB Salzburg in January of 2019 with a lot of expectation around him based on his performances there. And I think he's not really got the run in the team that people were expecting. That's why at the beginning of the year there was a lot of interest, and now as it's shown that he's not one of the starting choices, he's kind of tapered off a bit. But peak prices are actually something that I do look at, because at the start of the season there was no games that had influenced his price there. He hadn't won PB, it was just expectation of him playing. So I'm pretty confident that if he was to start playing in the team again, he could easily get back to that price of 98p. This would represent a 40% return, and that to me is just from him playing more games. And if he was to start posting some good PB scores or win a PB, then I actually think that you could far exceed this total. Now if we take a look at Haidara's transfer market, you can see that he's a 21-year-old Malayan international, and he's got a couple of trophies already from his time at Salzburg, one of which is the UEFA Youth League trophy, which he won in 2017. In January of this year, he moved from Salzburg to Leipzig for 18 million, which is a pretty decent price for a 20-year-old at the time. But having only started 6 games in the league for them so far, he struggled to live up to the excitement around his original transfer fee. Now taking a look at his career stats, he has 137 games, 18 goals and 24 assists. These have come mainly at centre mid and right mid, but he also has featured at DM and AM, and on the left as well. So he does have a little bit of versatility to his game, and his combined goal and assist record works out to 0.42 per 90. But with a lot of time spent in the Austrian Bundesliga and a sample size of just 9,000 minutes, it's hard to put a lot of weight on these figures. But even if we were to drop it to around 0.3, that would still be a good return for a central midfielder. So I like the look of these stats in terms of his potential for good peak scores when he does get a run in the first team. So here we have Haidara's foot mob, and since joining Leipzig, there hasn't really been many opportunities for him. Looking here at his Bundesliga total over the last 2 seasons, this season he started 2 games and been subbed on in 5, and last season he started 4 and was subbed on in 5. And when you look into his detailed stats, then we can actually see that it's even worse when you look at his playing time over the 2 seasons, with 378 minutes in the 2018-19 season and 322 minutes in the 2019-20 season so far. So when I saw this, I still wanted to get a good feel for his stats, and having seen him play for Leipzig and for Salzburg, he looks to me like a real talent and a bit of a focal point of play when he was playing for Salzburg especially. So I decided I was going to compile some of these figures to see what I could get out of it. So what I've done in this spreadsheet is I've taken the stats from all the PB eligible competitions that Haidara's played in over the last 2 seasons in order to try and get a feel for what he could achieve once he breaks into the team, either at Leipzig or on loan with another PB team. I think looking at this list, it was well worth the effort, as it turns out these are pretty impressive. Considering that he was only 19 to 21 years old when he got these stats, the list is very promising. The three major areas are all over 1 per 90 marker that I look for, with 1.5, 1.2 and 1.9. Those numbers would be good for an attacking midfielder of his age, so when you add in the 2.8 tackles per 90 and the 57 passes, to me this is looking like a really solid potential PB player. On top of this, you can add the fact that Leipzig are a dominant team in most matches, which makes things look pretty rosy for the future if he does manage to break into the team. To finish off, I'm just going to take a quick look at Haidara's master stats table info on Football Index Edge. So this is another case where the limited playing time has affected Haidara's PB stats negatively, leaving his average down at 55.2. But some positives we can take from this is that he's actually won 6p in PB dividends with a peak score of 171. This came back in April of 2018 in the quarter-final of the Europa League for Salzburg, where they beat Lazio and he scored the winning goal in that tie. This actually was a star man win for him, so in today's money that would have been a 16p return, and when his price is only 70p, that would be a huge return. That's more than 20% in instant return. So the capability of winning those star man games, I think, is a big factor in why I would want to buy Haidara, especially at this price. And if we look on the right here at his top matchday scores, he has a few decent results, with 9 matchday scores above 100, 8 of which came on the old matrix. This is pretty good considering that over 100 was somewhat of a benchmark on the old matrix because the average winning scores were much, much lower. So overall, it's difficult to get too much information from this limited sample size, but I think the PB win versus Lazio is a pretty impressive result. And I actually organised this list of players by 21 and 22 year olds just to see how the 6p dividend return compares. And I think he's in the top 10 of midfielders of 21 to 22 year olds in terms of his matchday dividend returns. And that's without really playing in the last 12 months and prior to that being in a non-PB league. So there's not actually that many players who've managed to win dividends at such a young age, so it's a pretty good sign. So moving on now to the profit target analysis. I went for the comparative purchase option method today, and there were lots of players to choose from for this one. I chose to use some 22-year-old players due to the fact that Haidara has turned 22 in January, so I thought it made sense to mix in a bit of both just to be conservative. For my comparable players, I went for Lucas Toussaint at Lyon and Weston McKennie at Schalke. Now this is actually the first time that I've made a video where I owned another of the comparable purchase options at the time, then went straight on the index and sold them in order to buy more of the video pick. I think I learned my lesson from the Elena video where I'd stated that he was the better option over Haidara, and since then he went up about 20% and Haidara dropped 30%. Following this drop in price though, he's become more and more attractive to the point where he's now cheaper than Weston McKennie. So this time I'm backing my own research and hopefully I won't live to regret mentioning that here if McKennie was to rocket in future. But that shows the interesting situations that can develop over time on the index with prices shifting, and it's also showing how important it is to keep track of your player movements to wait for a good opportunity to buy. So anyway, in terms of the comparable purchase options, McKennie has a combined goal and assist record per 90 of 0.24, and Toussaint is well down at 0.06, so Haidara is a long way in front here with 0.42. For PB wins, Toussaint has 1 win for 2p and McKennie has none. There were some other considerations here, but to be honest, I think that it's pretty clear that Haidara is the better option for this price point, so I'm just going to move on to the target players. For my low target, I went for Benasser at AC Milan. Benasser has a combined goal and assist record of 0.13 per 90 with 2p in PB dividends. He has a peak of 176 and an average of 47. The only real benefit to Benasser over Haidara would be the fact that he's played twice as many minutes so far this season. But as all my trades are long-term holds, I'm not too worried about this. So I think this is a marker for where Haidara should be sitting now, if anything, and on top of that I think Benasser is also pretty cheap right now, as he hasn't managed any goals or assists in his 10 appearances so far this season, and he's dropped in price from up at 95p back in September. For my mid-target I went for Sander Berg at Genk. He's currently priced at £1.42, which is mainly down to speculation linking him with a move to England, I think. He also managed a decent PB score of 196 recently with a game-winning goal versus Malta when he was playing for Norway. He's only played in 16 PB games so far, so the sample size is pretty small, but he has an average of 106, which is pretty good considering. But with 5 of his games coming in the Champions League, there's going to be a little bit of a skew due to the multiplier on those scores. One downside for this player is combined goal and assist per 90, which is down at 0.08, which is going to make it very difficult for him to become a consistent PB performer if he was to get a move. Then for my high target, I went for Frankie de Jong at Barcelona. This is a bit of a strange one on paper, as De Jong hasn't really justified his price yet in terms of PB wins. But there's a lot of hope of him improving considerably in the future, and the fact that he's playing regularly at Barcelona, who are a great PB team overall, is probably helping his price. There wasn't really any standout 22-year-old centre mids when it came to proven PB winners, so it's hard to put an accurate figure on what price you could expect to see if Haidara was to make the step up at Leipzig and manage to get a couple more dividend wins or big PB scores behind him. Tielemans at Leicester would have been the highest priced player in this category, but as he plays in England I wanted to aim a little lower, so De Jong was a good second option. De Jong has the highest average PB for a 22-year-old CM on the index, and his peak PB score of 212 is one of 6 scores he's posted that are higher than Haidara's peak score of 171. But all of those will come on the new matrix, and some of them will have the Champions League multiplier on. So it's difficult to accurately compare their PB potential. As far as combined goal and assist record, De Jong is at 0.2 per 90, which puts him in third place behind Haidara and McKennie out of all the players we've looked at in today's analysis. So this leaves us with a target profit range of 14% for the low, 102% for the mid, and 183% for the high. For this pick in the short term, I'm aiming somewhere between the low and the mid targets, if Haidara manages to get a bit more game time in the second half of the season, or if he gets a loan. For my 12-month target, I think somewhere between the mid and high is reasonable if Haidara was to start getting more game time and show some promise in potential PB wins. For me, the only risk would be that if he stays at Leipzig through the summer without any improvement in his game time, in this situation you're probably going to see a small decline in price over the rest of the season before he picks back up in anticipation of the new season next year. The other downside would be if he was to get a loan move to a non-PB league, but seeing as he's already proven himself at Salzburg, I think this is very unlikely. That's all we've got for you on today's pick. Again, if you enjoyed the video, like, comment and subscribe. Also, if you know someone else who might like the video, then sharing with them would really help me out. There are links in the description for signing up to Football Index and Football Index Edge if you haven't already. And don't forget to check out the other videos on the channel for more strategy videos and the other picks of the day. Most picks are long-term holds with depressed prices for some reason or other, so often the picks can still offer the same value, if not better, a few weeks after. And the research methods and reasoning can help if you're new to the index and want to learn to analyse your own players. Thanks for watching, good luck on the index.